So ask me some questions, and or ask you some questions, and you'll tell me no lies.
Right.
Okay. So, what I want to get back to is what you were saying about being a teacher.
Yes.
So, what made you want to be a teacher?
I always wanted to be a teacher. I think as soon as I could read, that I thought, this is what I want to be, and especially when I went to school and I skipped kindergarten because I already, I knew enough to go into the first grade. We used to have a kindergarten. And but I lived with Hilda Allen, who also was my teacher. I wasn't too keen on her.
But you said she was funny.
Yeah, well, my mother was the funny one, but she could make Hilda laugh too. And it was good for my parents because that was in the days of very little money. I was born in 1934, and I went to school when I was 5 and skipped a grade. I skipped the sub-primary, that's no big thing. But that is because of my Aunt Mary. Because I used to go, did you ever know Aunt Mary?
Yes.
Okay. And I stayed with her as often as possible in Blue Hill. And she had the messiest room that one could ever imagine. And we had to go through her parents' room to get to her room. And I had to pick up the stuff to get up into the bed.
But would she read to you?
She loved teaching. She wanted to be, I think was 6 years older than I. 5 or 6 years older.
So she was, at that point, she was still a young girl.
Yes, so maybe she was a little bit younger than that, but she was a few years older than I. That much I know. And I just, as I said, I adored her, and I loved being with my grandparents over there, and they lived in a very big house, which is still there in Blue Hill, and it's visible from the road. And that's where we always ended up for Christmas parties and all that type of stuff. But Mary was 12, so I'm not sure exactly how old I was. But she was 12 when she first started teaching me.
When she first started teaching you, so she would teach you by doing what? Reading to you?
Yes, not reading to me. She'd give me some questions to answer and that kind of thing. But a lot of it was we also played with some dolls. And my grandfather was very well known in Blue Hill. He was one of the leaders. Now, I am not exactly sure what position he had, but and he was almost always at his desk, but he had a wonderful sense of humor, and that is true of most of the McGraws.
So he was a McGraw. When you're talking about your father's father.
The 10 children.
Yeah.
He had those 10 children. I mean, he didn't. She did.
Well, and what was his name?
Sandy.
Yeah.
Samuel.
Yeah.
But everybody called him Sandy. Yes.
And his name was also
figure right there in Blue Hill.
His middle name was also Alexander, wasn't it? Wasn't his middle name also Alexander?
Yes, I think it was Samuel Alexander McGraw.
Yeah.
And then Richard Alexander McGraw, because Dad was the oldest. There were a lot of McGraws, but Dad was the first.
So
Charlie and Danny and Bill, Arnold.
So your aunt, who was only she was only a couple of years older than you.
Yeah, well, she may have been a little more than a couple of years older. Maybe 3 or 4, I'm not sure, but she died a year ago.
Okay, and she got you interested in teaching at a very young age.
Well, what she did in teaching me was not to get me so much interested in teaching, but getting me to learn.
Mhm.
And then I decided myself that I wanted to be a teacher. But she may have told me that. I'm not sure that she taught or not, but she knew how to teach me.
So then when you were in high school,
Yes.
you knew you wanted to be a teacher.
Yes.
And you went to,
I've always known I went. What else would I do?
I don't know.
No, right. And Jane, that's the last thing Jane would want to do, but she wanted to be the nurse. So that's, those are the things that women could do in those days. One could be a teacher and one could be a nurse. Mm-hmm. Trying to grasp something else a little deeper or more important was difficult for women.
Is there? I mean, I understand that. Obviously, I think those two professions are deep and important.
Yes.
But for you, you went to Gorham. Was it Gorham's teacher?
Yes,
Gorham Teachers
I did.
College
when I
then?
graduated from Elseth High School, I went to Gorham for a year and a week. And what I have are these wonderful letters, that Osmond and I wrote back and forth. But I haven't even gotten through the whole batch. It's all on my dining room table. And it's just amazing to me. He was a good writer.
Oh yeah.
Yes. And he'd write letters, and he was, I think, in his last year at the University of Maine, and I was in my first year at Gorham. And when he got his job in East Corinth, and I had already gone, a week or two.
And as a sophomore?
No.
Well, you gone as a...
Yeah.
Oh, your first year?
Just my friend. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, when I became a sophomore, yes, you're right. I went back to because he and I had been dating, and then he got the job, and I went back to school, and I thought, this is foolish, because I always knew that I would finish school sooner or later, and and I did it by a little bit at a time. But anyway, so he came, and they're very interesting. His letters to me and my letters to him, and I still have quite a few of those to read. I've got 4 of those volumes on my dining room table. So
you got married. You got married.
Yes, we were married, and we were married in the Surrey church. And as soon as we said our vows, I think we ran right by the people and down the road to our house. Well, my mother, of course, had a few goodies, and he did not want to stay there very long at all. Then we stayed in a place in Camden, a very nice place, as a matter of fact, for our first night. So, it really was the first night.
What does that mean?
Blood. I knew you would like that.
Of course. So you go on your honeymoon, and then you move to
What?
you moved to Corinth or East Corinth.
Yes, moved to Corinth after the honeymoon. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you said it was a big cold house.
Yes. It was an old house. It wasn't really that big. It was an old, cold house.
And you guys had the house. It was you had the entire house to yourselves. You weren't. It wasn't
I had
like
the what?
You had the entire house to yourselves?
Yeah, oh yes, we had the entire house to ourselves.
Yeah.
And wonderful people there. I mean, I quickly got acquainted with them. And in fact, they had, well, your father was there first because he went there as soon as he graduated and stayed with these super people. Stayed, and they really wanted him to marry, to get really acquainted with their daughter, Sarah Jane.
Oh, really?
Yes, really. He wasn't, you wouldn't be interested in her either. But
what does that mean? What was wrong with Sarah
Jane?
Jane?
With me.
Sarah Jane.
Sarah Jane, yes.
Okay, but you're saying that I wouldn't have been interested in her either.
No, you would not.
So why would you make that assumption?
Because I think you know better than that.
That's funny.
And besides that, I mean, you wouldn't even have to know better than that. I know that you could say, well, hey, how about a date and get one?
Oh, this is wonderful stuff.
Think I should have some more wine?
Yes. But so you guys stayed in Corinth.
Yes.
It was just like a year, right?
East Corinth,
It's
yes.
East Corinth. That's what I
Yes.
always kind of get confused.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
East Corinth, and you were there. It was only about a year, wasn't
I
it?
think it was. And then he got good because he was looking, for wider pastures. And of course,
Except
going
not
to
with
Mars
Sarah,
Hill.
but
No, not with Sarah. And I did. Everybody was so good to us in Mars Hill they were too, but in East Corinth, and your father, of course. I mean, that was his first job as a town manager,
right.
and he was wonderful. Always was, all the way through his career.
Yeah.
I mean, he always. I mean, that's a tough career, especially in Freeport. Because we were in East Corinth and Mars Hill, and then Freeport. And of course, I had lived in Freeport when I was in the fourth, fifth grade, and I loved Freeport. But there were a lot of people there who really had no appreciation for, somebody coming in and taking over, because he was the first one.
He was the first town manager that Freeport
He was the first
had.
town manager there, so that was difficult. And what a difference between there and going to, Mars Hill. That was our next step. And I loved the people there, and that's where we met Dottie and George, who were very good friends of ours for quite a while. And had the Young Mothers Club. Wherever I was, I had a Young Mothers Club. Pretty soon it turned into the Old Mothers Club. And we had a great house. We rented the house. We had downstairs, and there was an older couple upstairs, and they were wonderful. Everybody there in Mars Hill was really wonderful to us. And that's where we met Dottie and George Ullman. I don't know if you ever remember hearing us
Yes.
talk.
Oh, sure. I met them.
Yes, you met them. Okay.
Yeah.
And they were, of course, very good friends of ours. And she had just had a baby, I think. And then, of course, I had a baby.
Yep.
So.
And so you guys had a lot in common.
So what?
You had a lot in common.
Yes.
Wasn't George like a coach? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he was a teacher and a coach.
He won the Patriots Day 5 miler in Portland is one of the oldest road races
Oh, really?
ever, and he won it with
Oh, my goodness.
He won it one year. He won it. Dad used to send him this stuff all the time. Whenever they would post the winners, Dad would send the results to him and then say to George, "You won it with the slowest time ever."
Yes, I think I do remember that. They were so good. Such wonderful people.
So you were there in Mars Hill.
Yes, I think. I don't know how many years. 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
You were there.
Because it
'Cause
seems like
I had Lynn.
yeah. I bet you were. I bet you
And
were.
I guess I must have had Lorna too, because I thought it was.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
did. I don't know for sure, but I think you did.
Yes.
And then I think it was 1957 that you moved to Freeport.
Okay.
And I think
probably-
you were in Freeport from 57 to 62.
Yeah. Because I loved Freeport,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a great place for your father. It was a tough place.
What was tough?
The people. A lot of the people. And a lot of the people, I guess, resented having town not a lot of the people, some of the people resented having a town manager, but we also made a lot of friends there.
Yeah.
Janice and Mo, do you
Yeah.
remember them?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And I haven't seen them for a long time.
I still have connection with Sheila.
Oh, that's right.
Sheila is out in California. But Janice and Mo are just sweet people. They're just
Oh.
nice. Well, I still have connection with Glenn Marks.
Yes. Oh, you do?
Mm-hmm.
Where is Glenn?
Glenn's out. I think he's in Colorado. He's been out in Colorado for a long time.
Yes.
Joe Jr. is in Portland. And then I know that Lori, I still see stuff from her all on Facebook. But
Wow.
and Andrea, I'm not
Andrea
sure.
was the youngest.
She was the youngest.
Yes. So I really didn't know her very well.
No, because we moved. What's incredible is that we moved when I was 3.
Yes.
But I would still go over. I mean, I'm not sure how that connection happened, but I used to go over there a lot when I was a kid. And
How did you get over there?
well, when I was younger, you would give me a ride, but I certainly had times when I rode my bike from Falmouth to Freeport.
Gee, I'd forgotten all about that.
Yeah, and then I'd get drunk in 8th grade and hang out with Glenn.
And just what?
I'd get drunk in 8th grade and hang out with Glenn. Happened, just telling you.
Yeah, I believe you.
So, but going back to Freeport. So, Dad's in Freeport, and we know that you had to cover. You were covering for what was it? The Brunswick Times
Yes,
Record,
Brunswick Record.
and you're covering events in Freeport.
Right.
And the crowd comes to Dad is interested in
Yes,
getting a raise,
Right.
and the crowd says, "Let him go,
Right.
let him go."
Right.
There's everybody coming, and because they're going to vote on the town budget for the next year.
Yes.
And one of the people says, "If we don't pass this, he's going to leave." And a bunch of people say, "Let him go, let him go."
Yes, I was witness to all of that.
You witnessed all that, which had to be, in my mind, incredibly humiliating.
Yes.
and pressure packed. You're in probably several hundred people saying let him go, and then it's your husband, and then you have to write the article for the Brunswick
Right.
Times Record
Right.
covering it.
Right.
So that must have been
Yes.
incredible.
Oh, John, what was his name? Who was my editor? He and I were very good friends. Once in a while he'd come get me because I didn't have a car that I could drive over there to the Brunswick Record, all the time. And I remember hitchhiking back.
So you had kids,
Yes,
and you were in Freeport,
yes.
and you would hitchhike down Route 1, basically.
Yeah, well,
over
I didn't
to-
hitchhike down. I don't know. Somebody would have taken me over, but then John. Oh, what the heck was his name? But anyway, he came over quite often and
Picked up what you'd written.
right. And then when I went to a restaurant in I wish I could remember that better. Down in the Bar Harbor area. Lo and behold, John Cole.
John Cole?
Yeah, he had retired.
Okay.
And I think Austin was with me. Anyway, I'm not sure what.
So John Cole was the editor in Brunswick.
Yeah, tremendous man. But and he came. It was in the summer. I'm trying to think of the exact place that was. It wasn't actually. I don't know. I'll think of it in the night maybe. But anyway, we were both in the same very nice restaurant at the same time. I saw him and I went over and talked with him, and he and I were both so happy to hear each other, see each other, and that's when he told me he didn't have too much longer to live.
Oh.
Well, that was.
How many years ago was that?
Devastating for me because, you know, I knew I could count on him to be. I mean, he would never be. Really
Well, wait a minute. This was
critical.
back then. You're talking about back. This
Yeah,
was
way
in a
back,
recent.
way back.
So
When I was in Freeport writing.
But you happened to see him in Bar Harbor.
Yes, I did.
Okay. So did you?
But that was after. That was quite a few years afterwards.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
he must have been down
So
there.
it wasn't while you were actually writing
no,
for the.
no,
Okay.
that was
right.
all over with. But I just was so happy to see him at that restaurant, and he was happy to see me. And I really will never forget him.
And so he helped you write that article, or you submitted the article, and he was the editor,
I
and he.
never had much criticism from.
Well, I'm sure you didn't. Yeah.
You know, once I wrote something.
Sure. So then you guys,
We went from Freeport to Falmouth, right?
Yeah. 1962.
Yes. And there was quite a difference between Freeport and Falmouth.
Yeah.
And that was a good life. And then,
And you went back to school.
yes, and I went back to school. That was what I was always determined to do that. When I had a good time, I had some nice rides with some, because I went back to school in Portland during the daytime, and then, and there was a very good friend, old enough to be my mother. But she was taking courses at, where did I go?
Well, it would have been Gorham Teachers College
Gorham Teachers,
back
yes.
then.
Okay, so she was taking courses, and her husband drove. And so I was able to ride with them most of the time.
Did they live in Falmouth?
Yeah, they did. They weren't too far away from.
Were they on Pleasant Hill Road?
On what?
Pleasant Hill Road?
Could be.
Was
No,
it-
they weren't on Pleasant Hill Road.
They weren't.
No, they were out the other way.
I don't know who that was.
No,
You don't remember their name?
no, I don't. I might someplace have them written down. But they were wonderful, and I loved driving there, and I loved going back there, you know, and taking courses, because then I knew I was eventually going to cover the whole thing.
So, you've got 3 kids.
Yep.
Dad's a town manager in Falmouth.
Got 3 kids, what?
Well, at this point, you have 3 children.
Right,
Dad's a town manager in Falmouth.
right,
You're going to school,
right.
and you're balancing all that.
Right.
And how was that?
It was okay, because I've always always determined, you know, that I was going to finish my education, but I knew I didn't have to have that done before I married your father. I knew it could come, you know, later, which it did, and that was it was fine. I was very
See,
glad I did that. Once your kids were in school, and of course I taught at the high school, I taught at the grammar school for a time, right there in is that Falmouth? Yeah, that's Falmouth.
Well, it's what's
And I taught at the high school.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah.
So a couple of things, and you may not be remembering. What a couple of things that come to mind to me is that how supportive Dad was.
Yes.
He was always supportive of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no
And I knew you were
question.
of him. I'm not. I mean, but he was an
I was
incredibly.
very, very proud of him, and I had every reason to be proud of him.
And he was very proud of you.
Yeah, and I mean, and we always felt we were very fortunate. I mean, there were, of course, ups and downs, more so now than ever, but I guess we were proud of ourselves.
Well, I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think that's important. So when you're talking about there are ups and downs, so it's the
I mean, when I say ups and downs, I don't mean that your father and I would go for days without talking or anything like that. No. I mean, they were things, well, that just ordinarily happen. And they happen sometimes when you have kids, too.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But really, I never have thought of my life as. I've always thought of my life. I've always thought that I had a wonderful life,
yeah.
and I know a lot of people have not had that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I look at Jane. I mean, she thinks. I'm sure she's happy, basically, with her life, but she didn't have a wonderful life with Bill.
So, getting back to you and Dad.
Getting back to what?
You and Dad.
Yes.
So it's imagine yourself in the early to mid 60s.
Early to mid
60s.
60s.
So, let's say I'm in kindergarten, first grade, somewhere around there. Lyndon Motor in school.
Where was he in the 60s?
He was in Falmouth.
Yeah.
So, when you say you had your ups and downs, what would be an up and what would be a down?
Oh, nothing major. Really. No, I probably misstated that.
No, I'm just I'm just
No,
curious.
no,
I mean,
because when I really think we I think it was from Falmouth when we would go to those dances, every Saturday.
you would go to a dance every Saturday, you think, in
Yeah,
Falmouth?
up in,
What were the dances? Oh, well, that you're talking about Harmony Hall.
Yes, I'm talking about
That was later.
Oh, that was later.
I just know that because that was pretty much when you moved to Yarmouth, because Harmony Hall was out in
Okay.
North Yarmouth.
Yes, that's right. You're right.
So, see, isn't it amazing how intimately I know my parents' lives?
Yes, it is. Whatever. I know I loved it.
Well, you had a lot to love.
Yes.
You know, and
And my mother came. Went up there with us.
well, it's interesting to me that Gran was Gran 78 when she passed away.
I think so.
So, tell me about Gran. Tell me about your mother. What do you think of when you think of your mother?
Nothing critical to say about my mother. She had to put up with so much because she and Dad had to get married and they had to live with Adelia. And that was tough. And her happiest time was when she was in Freeport. Nanny wasn't there and Dad was working in Portland.
So, Adelia was the teacher?
Adelia was my grandmother.
Oh, that was, okay, all right. So-
Adelia Elston Milliken.
So, Gran and Richard got pregnant, got to get married. It's at this point it's 19 well, it's 1933, not 1934 when they get pregnant. And they get married. They move in with
Nanny.
your mother's mother, who is what do you think of when you think of her?
My mother's mother, and she
Yeah.
could be very critical. And my mother, my mother did not pussyfoot around her.
She didn't?
Not really, no. When my mother had jobs, she worked for Mrs. Minigrode. And Mrs. Minigrode, in the house is right there, and to go up the hill. And they...
I want to know your mother's personality versus...
My mother's personality? I thought it was terrific.
Yeah.
I mean, she'd get a little... She was not happy with having to live with Nanny, for so long.
But you're saying she didn't pussyfoot around even with Nanny. It seems like everybody
She
else
didn't really
pussyfoot.
No, she really didn't pussyfoot, but she was careful. Nanny would kind of be, I don't know what... Nanny was very good to me, and she made clothes, and I don't know if I ever had her... No, I didn't. Mom stayed with us, after Dad died. Mom stayed with us in Falmouth.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
She stayed with us in Falmouth,
And
then she stayed with us in Yarmouth.
yes, right.
So she used to be in
and that was to give Jane
a break.
a break. And so Jane was, kind of stuck there. So she definitely needed that break.
Sure, she did.
Yes.
Sort of like what we do with you.
Yeah. Okay, that's the end.
But the piece that I want to capture, okay? I was trying to get kind of a history, but one of my favorite all-time human beings.
All-time what?
Human beings. One of my favorite is your mother.
Oh, right.
I mean, to me, she was... Now I get real emotional.
She had a
but
wonderful sense of humor,
she
and she
had
had a woman who took her under her wing and took her to Florida.
Yeah.
Yes, and so she had a chance for a pretty good education there.
Yeah.
And so she was kind of ahead of a lot of other wives who had been married, because she did have that.
A lot of other wives that got pregnant out of wedlock.
Yeah.
But no, Gran to me is, honestly, if I model behavior, I think it's more about Gran for me.
Yeah.
My own behavior. I think that she loved people, and
She had a wonderful sense of humor.
she had a wonderful sense of humor.
But a lot of the McGraws had a wonderful
Oh
sense
yeah,
of
the
humor.
McGraws do.
Yes.
They're wonderful people, but for her, even in her down moments, in her darkest moments, and I think she had a lot of dark moments.
Yeah.
She did not put that off on others.
No.
She took her dark moments and she handled them on her own. And whenever, ever, I walked through the door of her house, it was so welcoming. And
So welcoming.
so welcoming and so excited and so... I see her every day. And I hear her laugh, and I see her face, and I
That's
think she was.
wonderful.
Yeah, I think she was a remarkable woman.
Yeah, there's no question.
And I felt she was somebody that you felt totally connected to.
Mm-hmm.
That she wasn't putting on airs. That she.
No.
She was truly in the moment, that she was honest, with a lot of kindness behind it. I think she said what she thought.
You think what?
I think she said what she thought.
Yes.
But she didn't say it, at least with me, in my experience. I'm only talking about my experience. She didn't say it to me in a negative way. She would express what she thought.
Right.
And I knew that with Gran, and that I could say just about anything,
Mm-hmm.
and she'd laugh.
Right.
And, obviously I respected her a lot,
Right.
so I wasn't, disgustingly inappropriate. But you could say whatever you wanted to Gran.
Mm-hmm.
And I model a lot of my own behavior from Gran, and from you and Dad too.
It's
I
very
mean,
interesting.
yeah, and I mean she was somebody that I wanted to, as I got older, and I not, I'm talking about teenager in my 20s. Who wants to go visit their grandmother? Well, when I was up there, I always wanted to go
Yes.
visit my grandmother, because she was really cool.
She was.
She was really cool,
No question.
and she, again, I think that self-effacing part of her personality. She loved to laugh at herself,
Yes.
and I think that is a specific tradition that I see in our family, and that I've tried to replicate in my own family. We love making fun of ourselves,
Yes.
and we love it when we're foolish, and when we have things that happen when we don't have any problem with us being the center of not ridicule. Ridicule isn't a good word, but somebody making fun of us.
Uh-huh.
We're funny. We're silly.
Yes. And there is that, the humor in the family. I mean, in the McGraw.
McGraw and Milliken.
And
I mean,
Milliken.
to me, that was what your
Well, you
father.
didn't find it very much in Henry Milliken, but.
You certainly find it in Bob Milliken.
Oh, yes.
He's one of the funniest men I know.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, absolutely. But not in Uncle
But
Henry.
Uncle Henry, I always really appreciated Uncle Henry and
Did you?
Frida. Yeah.
Oh, Aunt Frida was.
Even when I was a little kid. I didn't necessarily like going over there. It's Freeport. There
Yes.
wasn't a lot for me to do, but I always thought he was pretty funny.
Oh,
You
he
see?
did have a sense of humor. Yes. There's no question about
Well, he
that.
was smart as a whip.
Yes, and he was.
And Bob Milliken is just as smart as a
Yes,
whip,
yes.
with a really acerbic and funny
Yes.
sense of humor.
Right.
And so I think that, all these things, what I think about and what happens with me is that I know that who I am in every moment that I'm living, that in some ways I'm replicating everything I was exposed to. That I know that I view the world not in an odd way, but I'm willing to be really honest in a moment, and I'm really willing to be wrong. I'm really willing to just put it out there and say something that just comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids do that.
Yes,
And I think it's a strength.
I do too.
And I think that it's something that I learned from the McGraws, the Millikens. I wasn't around Dad's family enough to really do that. Granby was a quiet, peaceful, wonderful woman.
Right.
I didn't know Claude that well.
Oh, he was wonderful.
Yeah.
Dad-
And he spoke his mind.
He what?
He spoke his mind.
Yes, that's right. And he gave Jane a ride home every night. Jane was a cheerleader.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she loved Claude. He was, well, and I did, and of course,
So he gave her. So he worked at the liquor store
yes.
in Ellsworth.
And Jane was a cheerleader. And so there'd be games and stuff, and she'd need a ride home. And,
So at this point,
and I know the whole dialogue between Jane and Claude all the way home was hilarious.
I love
You
that.
can ask that, but that, I know that it was. He had just, and Rena had a pretty good sense of humor, but Claude especially.
He was quick and smart.
Absolutely. Very smart. I mean, and he didn't have much, college education or anything like that. He just was smart, born smart,
Yeah.
and tolerant. I never saw him angry.
You didn't.
No, and I wonder. I'll have to ask Osmond about that, because I don't think we've ever discussed that, whether if he had ever seen Claude angry. I don't know that he ever did, because he worked in the liquor store for a long time, so he may have been tipping the bottle and he never. No, I don't. I'm just kidding.
Well, no, I think that, Dad rarely got angry.
Really, what?
Well,
Got angry?
Dad wasn't, he never, I don't
Well, there
remember.
were things. He didn't get angry with you, or for the most part with me, but there would be things that would really get him uptight.
Well,
That had to do with his job.
and one of the things about Dad that I find fascinating is that he would have been a formidable opponent in a political
Formidable what?
opponent in any type of political realm. That
Yes.
he was always prepared.
Yes.
He always knew what he was
Yes,
talking
and
about.
everybody respected him.
And everybody respected him because he was honest.
Exactly.
I think that if he was wrong, he was willing to say, "Oh, I was wrong." He was quick
Oh, absolutely.
and funny, like Claude, and that there was a lot of power about Dad. That
Oh, yes. I think wherever we were, he had a lot of respect.
well, and he didn't have to manage.
No.
He didn't have to manage in a way of being, I'm right, and you need to understand that. He could manage. He had the confidence
He
to manage in a way that said, "This is what my leadership is. I want your ideas. I'm going to respect what you have to
and I
say."
think that all comes from education, to get that straight.
I actually think it comes from Claude.
You think it comes from what?
Claude.
Oh, Claude. Oh, probably comes from Claude, too.
I think it comes
Claude
more
had
from
the
upbringing.
education.
I think it comes more from upbringing and kind of DNA. Education
Well, I
helps
think
that.
there's some of this, some of that.
Well, I agree with you. It's some of this and this, in some of that. But Dad, he managed from a point of being prepared, being willing to listen,
Managed from the point of what?
being prepared. I think Dad was always prepared.
Yes,
I don't
absolutely.
think there was ever a time where he didn't dot an I and
Right,
cross a T and knew everything
sure
that was
of that.
going on. And then he also knew how to listen. He also could listen to anything, any opinion, and because he knew the subject matter so well, he could come back with the right answer. He knew what to say when people were interviewing him, and all of his employees, they did love him.
Oh, yes, so no question about that.
He was a kind man, and funny. I actually think that a huge part of it was his sense of humor too. And I think that was the same way with with us growing up. You know,
Yes.
I think that for me, you know, one of the things that I tell people all the time is that, you know, so we would sit down, and what I remember distinctly is the dinner table in Falmouth.
The what?
The dinner table
Oh,
in
yes.
Falmouth.
Yes. That I always felt that was very important. The dinner table.
And we had these long conversations there.
Yes.
And so we would have dinner, and you had your bell.
I did.
We had the bell outside the house, so the bell would ring when dinner was ready.
Oh,
I-
right, when you were outside
I
playing.
hated that bell. Because then I had to come home.
Yes.
But the bell would ring, and we'd come home, and, you know, I had you as the Democrat, and on the side of the table that I sat on, which most of the time was facing the backyard. You remember that picture
Yes.
table?
Yeah, well, that's where the sewer was, wasn't it?
Right,
Yes.
exactly. So I would be sitting on that side, so I was looking out the picture window that was there. You would be at the head of the table closest to the kitchen,
Right.
and Dad would be at the head of the
Right.
table closest to the living room. And you were a Democrat,
Yeah.
still are.
Right.
Dad was a Republican, still is.
Yeah.
And I would hear these conversations of these. What I saw were these two intelligent individuals that express themselves to each other, that would have disagreements at the dinner table, but who still always came together and loved each other.
Right.
That hugged and kissed, and you know, that you could. I one of the things that I was able to see was that you can have divergent opinions.
Could have what?
Divergent opinions.
Oh. Oh, right. That's very
And
important.
what's that?
I think that's very important.
Oh
We
yeah,
have
it was.
diverging opinions to let each other know.
Yes, and so I didn't take disagreements. Not you guys never. I don't remember arguments between the two of you. I remember strong-willed opinions on both sides. I do remember Dad baiting you a lot. He would just say something
Oh,
to get you
just
going.
to get me going.
Yes.
Yes.
That was the part that I've inherited.
Yeah.
That you know where somebody's coming from, and so you
Right.
throw some idea out there
Right.
just to get it going, just to
Right.
stimulate whatever.
Yeah, you're right.
And I always liked that.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, those types of things are some of my favorite pieces of life.
Very interesting.
So, all right, I'm going to halt.